Christopher Fennell.
Yeah, Chris Fennell's playing a 4-color deck, everything but black, and he's doing this on the back of the fact that he opened 8 different non-basic lands, so half of his mana pool taps for more than 1 color. Even running a banner on top of that, and with that, he has gone for the best of the best in the cards he's chosen to play. You see things like Herald of Anafenza in the deck, rares such as Jeering Instigator, and it really comes in the gold part of it. You have Abzan Guides in the deck, Avalanche Tusker, High Spire Mantis, Ponyback Brigade, Surrak Dragonclaw, all being run.
His opponent is Kassis, a legacy aficionado from the Syracuse, New York area, excuse me. Ely off to a really nice start here, starting at 3-0, but he can play any type of Magic. He's a very, very skilled player, so he's going to start off here with an Anak Bonkin. So he's going to get to the board very quickly, and I know you like those 2 drops for 2.
Yeah.
Get the things started off very quickly.
Well, I like them in that they put a lot of pressure on your opponent. If you're the kind of deck that can make them transition into the late game, as well as put a lot of early clock on someone, I really like it. Anak Bonkin, I think, is a poster child for what I would want my 2-drop to do.
Now, Jeering Instigator is going to come face up here. A lot of the times you expect to see that get played face down. You blow them out with a threatened effect. You know, you unmorph it, you take their creature, you attack them with it, maybe you try to block, who knows. But Chris is very clearly saying, I do not want to get beaten down this game. He's going to trade right away. And for the Bonkin, if that's the best that the Bonkin does, just trading with Jeering Instigator, I think if you're Chris, you're actually probably happy with that exchange.
If you're the control deck in a matchup, Jeering Instigator is not that great of a morph. It only actually steals a creature when you flip it up on your turn, so you can't, you know, do the Ray of Command trick where you make your opponent's creatures attack into each other. So it's basically just a 2-power creature here, and Chris treats it like that. It's fine to have it trade with Anak Bonkin.
Mardu Skull Hunter is what Kassis did play after attacking, so Fennell did have to discard. And you can tell exactly how Chris is playing this game. He's blocking immediately. He's not wasting any time. As you mentioned, he's the control deck here.
Yeah, well, look at the number of colors that they have. Ailey just played last turn his 3rd color in that dual land of Blossoming Sands, whereas Chris already has 4 colors online. Also, he's a little light on lands, meaning he really can't afford to get behind on the board.
Yeah, he did not play a 4th land. You saw Kassis last turn play a copy of Unyielding Krumar. Debilitating Injury is going to take care of that morph. Looks to be a Ponyback Brigade, so that's gone. In comes the Krumar for 3. Fennell's going to go down to 18. He's got to find some lands here, as Kassis, not the big follow-up I think he was looking for there with the 0-4, but it's better than nothing as he passes the turn back.
Yeah, he's got to know what he's up against. You have already seen an Abomination of Gadul and a Ponyback Brigade out of Chris Fennell. Well, that's all 5 colors right now. So the morphs, everything's on the table.
The big thing, too, is if you know Chris, and I've known Chris for a very, very long time, played a lot of side-limited drafts against him, as Kassis is going to delve here. He's also going to activate the Outlast, as Chris loves a good 5-color deck. So I'm sure when he opened his pool and he saw that he had 5 colors of mana, some great cards across all 5 colors, and all of those dual lands to make the mana base work. Sure, he hasn't drawn very many lands this game, but this is the kind of pool I think that Chris would want to open up for this particular tournament. He loves playing a bunch of different colors, a bunch of powerful cards, and as long as his mana works, he's in the driver's seat.
Yeah, still stuck on 3. He does have a High Spire Mantis right now in his hand, so once he hits a 4th land, he'll be able to at least trade with that Sultai Scavenger. But right now he's taking 6 a turn. This is not a good spot for Fennell.
Yeah, Disowned Ancestor right now, it's just a 1/5. It's got the Outlast counter on it. Of course, the Outlast activate is a colorless and a black, so that'll take 2 mana every turn there for Kassis, but he can slowly, while attacking these other threats, build another one. That's not a terrible spot to be in.
You're right. The Disowned Ancestor will become a problem down the road if the game lasts that long. Chris is in a tight enough spot where he's just going to ignore that card for the time being. But yeah, if Chris does stabilize from 9 here, there's going to be a pretty large creature on the other side.
Fennell will draw a card, does miss his land drop again for this turn, so he did not pick up one.
Yeah, he picked up a banner, but I think it may just be too late.
Yeah, banner's so awkward right now because you want the mana, but you have to pay quite a bit for the mana right now as Chris is being beaten down by that Krumar.
It's actually very similar to a tap land right now, in which that was the unfortunate part about Chris getting stuck on 3s, that half the lands in his deck are tap lands. So there's a good chance even if he hit his land, he wouldn't be able to do anything with it this turn.
It's interesting, right? Because for Chris, his mana in theory is great. You know, he's got all these lands, and I got all these, I've got all my colors. I can do whatever I want to, but those lands come into play tapped. And so, as you mentioned, he's got 7 more lands that he can draw that come into play tapped. So even if he drew a land, the chances of it coming into play tapped are very high, where he wouldn't even really get to do anything. And now he's just got to hard cast a mana in the banner before passing the turn back.
Yeah. his colors are great. His mana is okay. Having half your lands come into play tapped isn't without cost. And with the way Chris has built his deck, he doesn't have too many cheap tricks or cheap removal spells, really. So he's just going to jam a bunch of morphs and maybe a leaping master or two in the early game and hope that that's good enough to stop any aggro deck.
I think a lot of the games that Chris will play over the course of this weekend, we don't know how many times we're going to see him outside of this match. The exchange that we saw in the opening turns of the game, right? Jeering Instigator face up, block immediately. Don't even think twice. Play a morph, block immediately. That's the kind of game he wants to play. Because if he gets to the late game, he can overpower his opponent. But I don't think that Kassis has any interest in getting there. And now he's attacking now with all of his creatures. The Disowned Ancestor can't be blocked profitably. There are no profitable blocks here for Chris. And truthfully, in this particular format, you can correct me if I'm wrong, one mana tricks really don't exist.
There's Defiant Strike.
That's really about it.
Defiant Strike rarely changes the outcome of a combat. So no, there aren't, with the exception of Prowess decks playing Defiant Strike, there's not much at 1. Feat of Resistance is your cheapest combat trick, and that's at 2 mana.
And that one's really good.
That one's really good. So when you do want to, the combat tricks that do exist can be blowouts.
Ely Kassis is going to win game number 1 here over Christopher Fennell. Ely with his Abzan deck, currently up a game over Chris and his 5-color deck. Now, when I was in the booth with Patrick, normally Matthias, when we would do this, we would say, okay, let's take a look at the 15-card sideboard for the constructed deck. But we're playing some limited Magic this weekend, so we can't do that. So I know you've played a lot of limited Magic. You've played many a Pro Tour, former Rookie of the Year. When you are sideboarding for limited, what is your approach?
Well, first of all, I need to think about now that I know my opponent's plan, I can plan for it accordingly. Okay, so if I were Christopher in Chris Fennell's situation, say, Ailey looks like he's playing a more or less a black-white aggro deck. There's some splash, he might have a rare or two, but the challenge is going to be staying afloat with all these creatures he's going to play against me. So I'm going to need more things that can trade. So I'd be looking for 2-drops or anything that I really think could trade or block one of these early plays that he has. He does have, for example, he has a pair of Force Aways that he's not running. That card's not ideal, but I think I could definitely see that buying some time here. Other things, he has Assault Road Patrol right now on his board. That's the white 2/5. That looks like it's going to match up pretty well against what Ailey's trying to do. I would be interested in that card as well. Also, there's some things that he's not using in red. He's playing neither Bloodfire Expert nor Bloodfire Mentor. That's the 3/1 and the 0/5, both for 3 mana in red. The 3/1 will trade with pretty much anything, and the 0/5 will block pretty much anything. I might go with one or both of those.
Well, it's interesting here. I don't know. While you were taking a look kind of at Chris's deck list, I was looking at the bottom left-hand corner to see, okay, how are these players going to sideboard? Are they going to go to the well or not? Chris took a look very quickly. He pile shuffled. He's already presented his deck. He's good to go. I think the thought process here is, 1, I didn't really get to do anything that game, and 2, what are the cards that he saw? He saw a couple of creatures that, creatures that, those aren't bombs. He's not really going to sideboard a ton. I think his game plan isn't going to change I just need to stay in line, need to get my mana online. For Kassis, he may have moved a card in or out, and he actually picked up more information than Chris did in that game because of the discarding and the blocking with the morphs and stuff. So, as you mentioned, he got to see that Chris is likely a 5-color deck, unless he's playing some wacky off-color morphs that really he can't flip over, so. Yeah, Chris is going to start off at 21, as most players will do in this format.
Chris didn't lose that game because of a lack of strategy on his deck's part. It was an unfortunate draw. This may just be a good matchup for him, and so running the main deck at this a second time isn't unreasonable. He didn't see any bomb that requires a specific answer either.
Rugged Highlands, along with the Thornwood Falls here for Fennell to start, Kassis is going to play a Blossoming Sand. So these players are getting their mana online. Most games, it feels like in this format, you're going to start at 21 or 22 life. So having an aggressive deck, it's going to have to be very aggressive when players are starting at that 21, 22 life total.
Yeah, see a ton of lands in Fennell's hand.
Well, he didn't draw any last game, so.
Yeah, so now he's making up for it.
He's got to draw this game.
His hand is a little pressure light. He does have a Teamer Charm. That can function as a mana leak here. See, he puts up the mana for it.
It's always strange when you see a player in this particular format play a 3rd land untapped and just say, yeah, it's your turn. Like, you don't have a morph? Really? You don't have anything to do? And there's Teamer Charm. That's going to take care of that guy.
Yeah.
So
Chris is probably going to Teamer Charm anything that Ailey played that turn.
Yeah, if it's a morph, I think if it's actually anything. Now, it was a Caribou Bloodsucker, which looks to be a pretty good card in this format that he took care of with the Charm. But I agree with you. I think he's almost countering anything at that point.
I suppose he wouldn't counter a banner, but that's about it.
How dare you? Gotta slow him down. Keep that thing off the
Get that thing
table.
off. You can't ramp to 5. My mana leak will be no good.
There is the Disowned Ancestor yet again. So gonna work his way up via Outlast, as Fennell is just gonna pass the turn back again. So one thing you do have to know is there are a lot of tricks that are available in this format, and when you're sitting across from one of the best limited players in the entire world, even though they have 5 lands, you have to imagine they're up to something, as here's the Anak Bondkin again.
Well, Seegers, I think what Chris is up to is getting really flooded. I think he has 1 card in his non-land card, and that was the Sirach Dragonclaw he played.
That's a good one to have.
It's a good one to have.
Yeah.
It's not going to hold its own against Ailey's team, though. It's going to need backup.
A Dragonclaw is a very, very large monster, and it's coming across for 6, I believe, in just a minute. Now, let's not forget other creatures you can draw trample, not this one. Very reminiscent of Nylea, God of the Hunt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's going to crash here. Ailey does have a lot of toughness, and because he has these Outlast creatures with Anak Bondkin, one of the ways he can answer this is by making a first strike wall with his creatures. But that's going to be problematic based on the Herald of Anafenza in Chris's hand.
Well, Chris is taking a long look at his Dragonclaw here. You saw him play a Flooded Strand. I think he may be thinking, can I play my creatures as
With
though
flash?
they have flash? Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't.
Yep.
It's not a Yeva or a Teferi.
Yeah. And, the interesting thing there is, maybe that's a misstep, maybe it's not. But I think Chris may have thought that he could do that, and he might be learning right now, like many of us are at home and sometimes here in the booth, that, okay, maybe that's not the way I thought that worked exactly. It's a good time to learn that now instead of maybe at the Pro Tour next weekend for him.
Yeah, and Ailey's just he's okay with the race here right now. You see he plays Mardu Skull Hunter and just continues to swing his own creatures back.
Chris is going to sacrifice his Flooded Strand. It's going to go down to 19 here. We can't forget that Chris did gain some life earlier in the game from those lands that come into play and gain a life. He's going to consult the grip. You see there's a forest there, so he does have another land. He discarded a mountain to the raid trigger from the Skull Hunter. So he is flooding out a little bit here, but we are also in kind of an 18-land format here too, so players will draw lands. Let's see what this is going to be from Kassis. It's going to be a copy of Abzan Charm. Okay. So bye-bye Sirach Dragonclaw. And now Fennell's going to play the Herald of Anafenza, which you mentioned he had last turn. So again, maybe he thought he could play it with Flash when he could not.
Yeah, that would be my guess. There's not too much of an argument for hanging on to that, guys. When you're as flooded as Chris says, you have the 3 mana to pay for it every turn.
It's a Despise, and Chris is going to show you 3 lands, a Frontier Bivouac, a Forest, and a Mountain. So he is flooding very badly. We're going to see exactly how powerful Herald of Defense is in this game right now.
Yeah.
He's got nothing else.
Well, I don't even know if we're going to get to see that. I believe Ailey may have had that last card be a debilitating injury.
Jeez. He's tapping 2. Let's make it 5. Is it time for the Bloodflies?
It is time for a swarm of Bloodflies.
All right. 5 mana 2/2. We'll get 2 counters on that thing. And whenever a creature dies, Swarming Bloodfly is going to get a +1/+1 counter. We have seen cards like this in the past, like Algae Girl.
Yep, there's a whole cycle. Algae Gariel. There was a one like this, actually a black one, which had flying. It was a Undead Scavenger.
Yeah, something like that. We've seen cycles like this before. What happens with cards like this is they are small to begin. Like their mana cost outweighs their power and toughness. But with, you have a trade happen with a creature, I think it becomes a 4/4 right away. And then it's a real threat, and then things get really, really ugly, so.
Yeah, this one enters the battlefield with flying, so it has that going for it. And also the fact that, remember, 1/1 counters aren't just 1/1 counters in this set. They have a lot of synergy with, Abzan Battle Priest or something like that.
I suppose right now, that thing has first strike.
It does have first strike.
Because the Bondkin is in play.
The coolest thing I've seen with it is I saw someone play the rare Retribution of the Ancients with it. Lets you remove 1/1 counters from a creature to give a creature -X/-X.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a neat
That's
combo.
really good with it. I was like, oh, that's okay. All the 1 toughness creatures are just going to die. Okay, I get it.
Let's see what we have here. Smite the Monstrous here from Chris is going to take care of that. Okay, so War Behemoth does come down. It's at 3/6. The Herald of Anafenza is working its way up a little bit here. Now, Fennell's at 9. He's going to play a land in a forest here. He's going to activate the Outlast. A soldier token is going to come on in. Excuse me, a warrior token. I want to make sure I get that correct.
Yeah, and I can't believe that Ailey probably had a different card. Now the Herald is it's well outside of removal with a card like Debilitating Injury. He's going to have to use a hard kill spell on it.
Avalanche Tusker is the follow-up, so you can see Chris is definitely a 5-color deck. He's kind of doing his thing. He's got the big 6/4 out there, and then the white creature that is outlasting. It's growing. It's slowly but surely going to work its way towards taking over this game if Fennell can stay alive.
Yeah, he's gonna debilitating injury it, and I really think Ailey missed a window here when he could have hit Herald of Anafenza with the injury.
I think so. If he did have it at that time, I think you have to get that thing off the board as fast as you can because now it's out of range, as you mentioned, and he's got a steady stream of chump blockers here.
Yeah, well, he had a choice between debilitating injury on Herald or making the swarm of blood flies.
Okay.
So it would have set him back a turn on the flyers, which that's a pretty big investment. But as it is now, that Herald is going to do so much work against Ailey.
Now, the follow-up here for Kassis is a Seeker of the Way, and then he's going to activate the Outlast on the Disowned Ancestor. So that's going to become a 2/6 now. And Seeker of the Way, of course, with its prowess and its lifelink, very powerful card, but Kassis is empty-handed. So Fennell knows what he has to beat. And right now, it looks like he can beat the things that are on the table thus far.
Maybe. So there's the difficulty of he doesn't really want to keep tapping Herald of Anafenza because he needs it untapped to block. But then again, he does want to tap it because he needs to make soldiers. He's going to go for at least one more turn of 1/1s, but he's getting pretty low doing this.
Now, you saw Avalanche Tusker trade there with the Seeker of the Way. Now, what happens there, of course, with the big Avalanche Tusker is when it attacks, it gets to make something block. It was a 4/2. Seeker of the Way was a 2/2. So they're going to trade. Probably not the best thing that you can do with Avalanche Tusker, but it wasn't a 6/4. It was a 4/2.
It still was a 2-for-1.
Yeah.
And eventually, if Ailey just swung his creatures, the Tusker was going to end up blocking and trading anyway. So this way, at least Chris gets to make it trade on his own terms.
Yep. So it's a perfectly reasonable exchange. I think, for Chris, he probably wants to get more out of the Tusker, but given the situation that we're in, that's the best he can do. And so all he does is Outlast with the Herald again and pass the turn back. And now he's got a decision to make on if he does want to block this turn. And if so, how does he want to do it?
Ailey is getting lower on profitable attacks. You see, he can still push 2 there.
Chris is going to untap. He's at 4. The Herald right now is a 4/5, so it's looking pretty tough on defense here. Chris is going to pull the Frontier Bivouac forward. Of course, that's the Teamer Tri-Land. He's reaching for mana. Doesn't mean he has a spell. We don't know.
I believe it's High Spire Mantis that he has.
That's been over there for a long time, I believe. He's going to start by activating this. It's up to a 4/5. There's a Soldier token. Excuse me, let's make that the Herald's a 5/6, and now there is the High Spire Mantis. So, of course, 3/3 flying trample. He's trying his darndest to stabilize.
Yeah, he still has trouble killing these creatures. Both the Disowned Ancestor and the War Behemoth have a lot of points of toughness.
The one thing you can't forget, too, is that Chris is able to, take these chip shots a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised maybe if he decides to go down to 2 this turn. He looks like he's going to block immediately. But he has the ability to kind of take this down just because reach isn't really much of a thing. Though that is a very, very timely combat trick there in Defiant Strike.
He tried to put the Mantis on the Disowned Ancestor to just have a free block where they would bounce off each other. And I said, Defiant Strike, it hardly counts as 1-mana combat trick because it rarely changes the outcome of a combat, but this is one of the few situations where it does, and when it does it in a big way.
Yeah, we've seen tricks like that in the past, like a Guided Strike, like his first strike, but that's not what that does.
Yeah.
It's just +1/+0, and then you cantrip and draw a card, so that ends up being a great draw there for Kassis, where some other times maybe that's not the case.
No, a huge play for Kassis. He got to kill the Mantis and draw a card. Chris may be forced into not activating Herald. He's going to go at least one more. Herald up to a 6/7.
It's so big. It's gotten to the point now, as you mentioned, it's a 6/7 now. Of course, 5+1/+1 counters, and so 1/2, where the next turn he gets to untap with that, and then big bad War Behemoth is probably stuck on defense.
Yeah, he wants to get it to be big enough where it will kill any of the creatures that Ailey attacks with.
And now everybody's going to come into the red zone.
I really like this attack from Ailey. I think this is exactly the time he wants to do it. Because this stops Herald of Anafenza from mattering.
The entire time that Mardu Skullhunter has been hanging out, but Chris says, you get to draw a really good card. I get to draw one too,
Burn away.
There goes the Disowned Ancestor. Okay.
Yeah, it was a 2/6. And Ailey punished a little bit here. He had a Sultai Scavenger in hand. And now he's going to have to pay full value for that thing.
Now, this is interesting because I feel like that's something that's going to happen quite a few times. There is the Scavenger, and fortunately for Ailey, he does have the ability to pay full price for that. So Chris is going to have to find an answer for this now. But burn away inside of combat to remove your graveyard, it's going to be a blowout quite a few times in this format.
Yeah, I mean, and the blowouts are tempered, right? Because, yeah, it meant Ailey had to pay full mana for it. I don't know whether he had another play that turn that he was giving up, but that secondary ability on Burn Away, especially I think against some of the more expensive cards, things like Treasure Cruise, will be quite good.
We saw the Herald activate yet again. Chris is going to chump block the War Behemoth. The Scavenger's going to come across for 3. Fennell's down to 2. He needs to find an answer. He's got a very large Herald. He just needs to stop the flyer. Does he find anything that can help him when he's at 2 life?
I think he found Monastery Flock.
That'll do just fine.
I think that 0/5 flyer will be great.
Again, that's a real tribute, I think, to Chris's deck, right? Where Monastery Flock, not the sexiest card in the world. Does it play defense, let him get to the late game? Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that card, actually. 0/5 flyers are very hard to kill. If you think back to Return to Ravnica, Hover Barrier was perfectly acceptable.
That card was quite good.
It was quite good, and that was a format where a Stab Wound existed, too.
Thankfully, we don't have that in this one.
Yeah, getting your Hover Barrier Stab Wounded was rough.
Chris is going to play that morph. Now, the real question I have here for Fennell is, does he want to activate the Herald, or does he just want to leave it back on defense? Well, that's what he's weighing right now.
If he gets it 1 bigger, up to an 8-power creature, it's a 2-turn clock on Ailey, which that would be the advantage of getting it to 8, 9. I mean, it's already big enough where it will just kill anything.
And here's what makes this format really difficult. If you're Ailey Kassis right now, if we stop this game and said, hey, what's that morph? He's got every color mana in play. I have no idea what that morph is. One thing that he does know is that it needs to fly. That's the one thing that he can say is, okay, if it's a flying creature, all right, let me figure out what the flying morphs are. As you mentioned, it is Monastery Flock, so Chris is going to block right away. There's the 0/5 blocking the 3/3.
The worst case scenario would have been if it was the Abomination of Gudul he'd seen last game, because that's a 3/4 flyer.
Would have been a disaster.
Yeah, and if you're Ailey, it's like, please just don't have it be that guy.
So Chris makes it out of that turn alive, because he's just going to pass the turn back. As you see, Fennell's mana is untapped. And now, this is where the game gets really interesting, I think, because now it looks like he's attacking, so now he's trying to turn the corner. While Fennell has been basically barely hanging on and stabilizing at this 4-2 life total, we can't forget that Herald, while it makes a 1/1, it grows. That's a 7-point attack. So while Chris is barely staying alive, oh, by the way, if I do stabilize, I can start attacking you and close the game out really fast.
Yeah, he has Ailey already down to 8. Ailey probably will have to risk going to 1 if he even wants to block that card this coming turn.
Kassis is going to play a land. He's going to tap 4 mana. That is going to give his creatures +2/+1.
Yeah, it's Rush of Battle. It's going to be big enough that the Sultai Scavenger will eat Monastery Flock.
Here comes the Behemoth. There is some blocking that needs to be done. Chris is going to... Oh!
It's Woolly Loxodon was the morph. It's going to eat the War Behemoth. Or at least not die to it.
It's just not going to die
to it.
And now Kassis has to pass the turn back, and Fennell's going to quickly untap, and all of a sudden, we can see a lethal attack coming on Chris's side, and for Kassis, he needs to have a card like Killshot. He does not, and we're going to go and play a 3rd game here, Matthias.
A big turnaround. Ailey, I am curious there. So Ailey assumed that whatever Chris's morph, if Chris's morph was any morph that could have blocked the War Behemoth and lived, then Chris had it. But granted, there was 5 power from War Behemoth, so that was, I think, a pretty good risk taken on Ailey's part that just didn't turn out.
Think about the back-to-back series of draws there. Nothing crazy. He didn't peel a removal spell to kill that card. He didn't do anything crazy, but he peeled the perfect blocker in Monastery Flock, and then he peeled the perfect blocker to brick wall the War Behemoth that was a 5-power creature.
Yeah, not to mention, so Sultai Scavenger is a warrior, so it actually had lifelink on that attack, so Ailey went up to 13, and he's probably safe thinking, well, my opponent's not going to swing back for 13, but Herald of Anafenza plus Woolly Loxodon is actually exactly...
13.
It's exactly 13.
Well, sometimes things just break your way,
It's one of the few creatures that can survive that block and kill him.
Yeah, and be big enough to kill on the swing back. That was...
And maybe a one, the only morph that can get you in that spot. I wouldn't be surprised. Probably I think I wouldn't be surprised if that was the only one that gets you.
Now let's think. Just think. They're in the middle turns of the game. You can definitely say that game hinged on one crucial decision. Through all the morphing and everything, you mentioned it right away. He can debilitating injury that Herald of Anafenza. Kassis opted to play the Swarming Bloodflies instead, and that play, it's hard to say if it's right or wrong, but we can tell exactly what Kassis ended up losing to.
Herald of Anafenza was certainly part of that that game plan.
Yeah, debilitating injury ended up being okay, making the Avalanche Tusker a little bit worse, but at the end of the day, the Herald of Henza ended up letting him chump just enough, making it a big enough creature, and then getting the job done. And that's why we're headed to a third game here between Kassis and Fennell.
And that rush of battle was a good card for Chris to know about as well going into this last game.
Very, very true.
Knowing that your opponent is playing something like that tells you a lot about your opponent's game plan and lets you sideboard a lot more intelligently. As you see, unlike last game where he just presented, Chris is going to his sideboard for game 3.
He's picked up some information now. He's got a better idea of what is in Kassis' deck. Again, after game number 1, it doesn't surprise me to see him not sideboard. He didn't really see anything. He got beat down by a bunch of mediocre creatures, but now he picks up some information. He's 5 colors, which means a lot of the times in Limited, you see Kassis' Abzan, well, he's got access to 3 colors of his sideboard. Chris has access realistically to every single card in his pool to want to bring in this situation. That's what makes 5 colors so dangerous if the mana works.
Yeah, he doesn't have access to the black cards in his pool. Actually, even though he has a full 8 non-basics, he doesn't have access to black. So
that's odd.
I mean, it's convenient.
Yeah, I suppose.
If I could get 8 non-basics and have them be concentrated completely in 4 colors, I would be pretty happy with that. That does mean part of my sealed pool's inaccessible, but it means the other 4 you can just play.
What do you think of Rush of Battle as a card? A lot of the times you see a sorcery speed trick like that. Overrun, is obviously a great card. We've seen that through Magic's history. This is kind of a mini Overrun, and of course the warrior theme definitely helps. You like that card in this format?
I like it more in drafting. In sealed, I think you need somewhat of a specific deck to be able to utilize the card. There's a couple things that you really want to play with it. Take Up Arms and Ponyback Riders, or Ponyback Brigade. Both those things, and I suppose Hordling Outburst would be your third one. These are all things that make 3 1/1 tokens. You do need a critical mass of creatures to play a card like Rush of Battle, and those cards do it by themselves. I think outside of those cards, you'd want to play it in a warrior-heavy deck, because the sorcery speed trick, because it's a sorcery speed trick, it means that even when you swing, a large combat favors the blocker, so you're still going to be losing a lot of your creatures when you cast it, but you're going to be gaining just a ton of life. So you need to have a deck where your creatures don't matter too much. I'm thinking cards like Mardu Horde Chief, or a deck that really lends itself to racing situations, because that card is impossible to race against when it comes out of a warrior deck.
It is the Citadel for Kassis. And of course, both players are going to start. We're going to see this all weekend long with lands that come into play tapped on turn number 1. I'd be very surprised if we didn't.
Well, I think a turn 1 tapped Tri-land, even possibly in Constructed, is just the best turn 1 play right now.
There's the Anak Bondkin. So Kassis is going to get the ball rolling early. You see Fennell's at 21. Wouldn't be surprised to see him work his way up to 22, but he's just got a Plains, and he'll pass the turn back. Started the game off with a rugged Highlands. So he's going to try to get his mana online just like last game, and if he can stay alive, the power level of his cards can take over.
And Ailey has built his deck. When I was talking about what you can do with pools that you think are underwhelming, I think Ailey has done exactly that. We can say he's playing Abzan, but he's just playing black-white. There are a couple Abzan cards he's splashing for. He has an Abzan Charm, for example. And other than that, he's just 2-color aggro. And this is exactly the kind of strategy I was talking about and what I would be wanting to do against these big 5-color things.
Oh, he's got a Seeker of the Way on turn number 3. So he's got 2-power creatures out there right away. Seeker can, of course, grow if he has some sort of spell, even like a banner. As Fennell's just going to play a Morph and pass the turn back. Heck, a turn here where if he plays a Debilitating Injury would be a pretty good one here for Kassis.
Yeah, a Debilitating Injury would mean he could swing for 5 on this turn. And even without something like that, even something like a banner here would be pretty good. He could banner, level up his Bondkin, swing with Seeker.
Good turn.
Yeah, there's a lot of good plays that he has here. He does need to have his deck built in such a way that he can keep up pressure, because if he ever starts to let his pressure down, his ability to recover is very low.
Don't want to get to the late game. That's not the place where he wants to be. Here is the attack. Does Kassis have a trick? As Fennell is going to very quickly block. Again, we assume that this is how he's going to play the games, is he needs to do some blocking. There you do see the Morph there. The Ifrit Weapon Master.
And Unyielding Krumar from Ailey. I like the style of his deck here. And this is exactly what I would want to be doing with a deck. I think it's a very valid way to be building decks in Sealed right now.
Well, I think there's definitely a thought process where players are just going to try to play this morph on morph combat, and that might not be the way the games always play out. And so as a result, you can try to get under your opponent. And, you know, there are builds of decks like Fennell has here where I have 8 coming to play taps lands, and you can definitely run me over. That's the thing that can happen. You see him play a High Spirit Mantis. This is the way that he's going to try to stabilize a little bit here.
Yeah, but Chris doesn't even have all his colors working yet. He's been forced to be playing untapped lands on curve to even keep pace here.
See what Kassis can come up on his 5th turn. He's going to tap 2 mana. This is a debilitating injury. That's going to turn the Mantis into a 1/1. It's also going to turn a Seeker of the Way into a 3/3 lifelinker. So it's time to get into the red zone. Of course, favorable attacks here. I can see Chris is kind of wondering, does that actually work? It says non-creature spell for prowess.
Yes. So auras do trigger it, and he'll swing for 6.
It's a good attack, and it's a tough spot to be in for Fennell. He may have some interest in blocking this turn.
It's a very aggressive line. So Ailey had a free swing with just Unyielding Krumar, but for the cost of the debilitating injury, he can deal an additional 3, and he opts to do so because it looks like he has another follow-up creature.
Yeah, there is the Disowned Ancestor, and if 1's good, 2's better.
And this is really the late game for this style of deck that Ailey's going to play. If he runs out of ways to attack, he's just going to start leveling up these trees and hope that they're good enough.
Fennell's going to gain a life there off of the Blossoming Sands. He'll play a Morph and just simply pass the turn back. But as you mentioned, this feels very reminiscent of game number 1, right? Where Kassis is beating down some here, but kind of, you know, on the back burner are these Outlast creatures. Well, okay, these aren't going to do very much right away, but slowly but surely I will build these up. And then once you start to kind of get back into the game, well, this will be a 3/7, you know, maybe a 4/8 attacker.
Yeah. Swing from Ailey. Chris still can't block the Unyielding Krumar profitably. He may trade his Morph for Seeker of the Way.
Oh, he can try.
he can try. It's pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
It looks like he'll just chump the Krumar.
Now that block is interesting, but that's a block that I kind of like because it's the situation, right, where when's the best time to make that chump block? Assuming that he knows that his High Spirit Mantis isn't going to get any better, is it better to just kind of wait around and hope that I can do that later? It's like, you know, let's get this part of the game over with and block there.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to gain him much more than 3 life or really change a combat. I mean, a 1/1 probably won't change things against these Disowned Ancestors ever.
I will say this, as Chris does play a 6th land past the turn back, if you're Kassis, depending on the texture of your hand, attacking here can be very dangerous. We saw the morphs that Chris had last game, but that doesn't mean those are the only morphs that he does have. So here is a Despise. That's going to trigger the Prowess on Seeker of the Way. So again, that's going to be a 3/3, and you can see the grip here for Fennell. The Surrak Dragonclaw will be hit from the Despise. He's got Knobs on Charm that he can't cast, along with a Mountain and a Plains.
Well, he also can't cast the Surrak Dragonclaw. It's blue. Despite having a great mana base, Chris is color screwed. And now Ailey gets to know it.
You see Ailey kind of push the lands around and say, what, you can't cast those? It seems like it would be easy for you. And my draw just didn't really come together appropriately. So now, if you're Kassis, okay, well, you couldn't cast that card, and you can't cast the card in your hand and Obscene Charm. So is there a morph that you can unflip that really matters very much for me? If you think of the morphs that we've seen, Abomination of Gadul, can't unmorph that. Monastery Flock, can't unmorph that.
No, there's very few things he can do here. And Ailey's going to continue just outlasting. And he's playing he feels very ahead. He's playing pretty conservatively by not swinging either of those creatures.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, Woolly Loxodon is the one that would beat you.
He's got it pegged. That's a knowledge of the format, or at the very least, a knowledge of what happened last game.
Yeah, so he did just lose a game to use that card. He may not want to do it twice.
So Ailey does just outlast those 2 creatures and pass the turn back with no attacks. So a very smart play from him as he's just working his way up with these creatures. Let's see what this is going to be. So there's a swarm of Bloodflies. So now he can work his way in the skies and maybe even take some more risky lines with attacking because if my creature dies, that's cool. My swarm of Bloodflies gets larger.
Yeah, this is a good attack. Chris will probably have to kill one of these Disowned Ancestors. As soon as they outlast one more time, they can actually just swing into the Woolly Loxodon.
Yeah, and it won't die.
Right, they'll get that 7th point of toughness.
So now Chris, in this situation, yeah, he gets to kill something. We know that. For him, he's got to decide what it's going to be, and if he can beat the Swarming Bloodflies, and now it's time for him, one of the best limited players in the entire world, to go in the Think Tank.
Right, he does have a burn down, or burn away, so he could, once again, so he gets to exile the graveyard and kill any one of these creatures. It does deal 6.
This is the situation here that separates a good limited player from a great limited player. Chris Fennell is a great limited player. He knows the cards that are in his deck. He's having some mana issues right now. I'm sure he knows exactly how many untapped black sources he has for his Abzan Charm. So what's going to turn that on? How am I supposed to block in this situation? What cards I can draw to? He's taking a long time thinking about this block, because I think he should. It's crucial at this point.
Yeah, the decision is whether or not to kill a Krumar or an Ancestor here.
I think Seeker of the Way is going to come through every time. I think that one is never going to get blocked, so I can understand where he's coming from blocking the Disowned Ancestor.
Yeah, there is a line where Ailey gets to activate, if he leaves it alive, where next turn he activates both Disowned Ancestors and then just makes them both 3/7s and starts bullying Chris with them. And I think Chris really wants to avoid that board state, so this seems like the correct block.
Chris going to go through his hand. Just going to look at that burn away. Looks like he's going to cast it. Yeah, he will. So he's going to take down the Krumar. Take a look at this.
Yeah, wishes he had the time. He's playing to his black mana outs here. By not killing the Storm of Bloodflies, he's letting Bloodflies get up to a 4/4, which means he's going to take 4 next turn on it. But if he draws a black mana source, now he's made the creature big enough where he can Abzan Charm to kill the Bloodflies.
And I think all of his black mana sources come into play tapped and probably gain him a life. So that might be okay. It looks like he drew a banner.
Yeah, it's Teamer Banner, unfortunately.
Okay.
So I know for a second they're like, wait, maybe it's an untapped black source.
Yep.
He is low on black sources in his deck.
That doesn't come as much of a surprise. He's a 5-color deck, and it feels like the black splash he's just touching. Again, no basic swamp, so he's just going to pass the turn back here. And what Fennell is going to try to do, I believe, is feign some strength.
Yeah. He has at least one black dual land. He does have a copy of Scoured Barrens.
This is lethal attack. Chris is going to show the hand. He will extend it. So Eli Kassis is going to win this match over Christopher Fennell. 2-1. Abzan will take down 5-color, and for the Legacy Aficionado, he starts off this sealed deck tournament at 4-0.